Budget deficits aren't just math problems, they're leadership tests. They test how clearly we think under pressure, how well we communicate with those around us, and how courageously we're willing to act when resources are tight and the stakes are high. I've had the unique experience of stepping in as city manager to not one, but two cities that were facing serious structural budget deficits. In both cases, there were real fears about the future. Reserves were being depleted, service levels were in jeopardy, and in some cases, there wasn't even agreement on the scope of the problem, let alone a strategy for fixing it. But I didn't just inherit those situations, I embraced them. And over time, we found ways to restore fiscal health through a combination of strategy, transparency, and teamwork. We didn't just cut, we innovated. We didn't just patch holes, we redesigned how those organizations operated. In today's episode, I want to walk you through three of the biggest mistakes I've seen city managers make when facing budget deficits. And to be honest, I've made a few of them myself. So what I'm sharing isn't theory, it's lived experience. Deficits reveal more than financial gaps. It's not just our budgets on the line, it's our legacy as leaders. In times of fiscal uncertainty, our communities don't just need budget balancers, they need visionaries. When the numbers go red, that's when true leadership shows its color. Welcome to Gov360, your full circle view on local government. We are living in an incredibly difficult moment for municipal finance. Inflation is driving up the cost of goods and services. Labor shortages and competitive pressure are forcing cities to increase salaries and benefits. Pension costs continue to climb, and in many communities, the lion's share of the general fund is being consumed by public safety, leaving less and less for other essential services like street maintenance, parks, and planning. And if that weren't enough, our revenue sources are getting more fragile. Sales tax volatility, a sluggish commercial development environment, and, in California, the slow churn of property tax under Prop 13 are squeezing budgets tighter and tighter. What makes this moment different isn't just that deficits are growing, it's that the tools we've traditionally relied on to solve them, quick cuts, across-the-board freezes, tapping reserves, are now often insufficient. The challenges are structural. The solutions need to be strategic. Whether you're a city manager, an analyst, a department director, or part of a finance team, chances are you're working in a local government agency that's struggling to balance its budget. And if you're not yet, odds are you will be. Because more and more cities and counties are finding themselves in a position where costs are rising faster than revenue. So here's what I'd like to do in this episode. I want to walk through three of the most common mistakes I've seen, including a few I've made myself, when organizations face these fiscal cliffs. Mistakes that, if we're not careful, can erode trust, delay recovery, or even deepen the deficit. But I'm not just here to point out the problems. I want to offer alternatives, ideas, questions, mindsets, and hopefully a bit of encouragement too. And then in upcoming episodes of Gov360, we'll dig deeper with guests who are helping cities rethink revenue in bold and creative ways. Some of these approaches may challenge our assumptions about the role of local government, but they remind us that the fiscal pressure doesn't have to mean retreat. It can mean reinvention. So let's dive in. Mistake number one, focusing on cuts without pursuing strategic revenue. Let's start with the most common and maybe most dangerous mistake, treating the deficit as a simple subtraction problem. You see it all the time. A city identifies a shortfall. The finance director drafts a plan to cut 5% across every department. Equal pain, they say. Travel budgets get slashed, hiring is frozen, staff training is delayed again. Then come the deeper hits. Public Works lets streetlight maintenance slip, so neighborhoods stay dark longer and residents start to feel unsafe walking after sunset. Potholes go unfilled, tree trimming is deferred, and graffiti removal response times double. In community services, summer camps shrink from 8 weeks to 4. Senior center hours get cut, youth sports leagues get canceled or start charging more. Suddenly, those low-cost programs that helped build community and kept kids busy after school, gone. Libraries reduce evening hours. Building permits and plan reviews take weeks longer because the planning team is short-staffed. Code enforcement calls don't get returned. And people notice, not in a spreadsheet, but in their lived experience. And what starts as a fiscal decision quickly becomes a political one, as residents begin to feel like their city is falling behind. Not because anyone made a reckless choice, but because a series of slow, silent cuts chipped away at the services that made the city feel livable, safe, and connected in the first place. And for a few months, or maybe even a fiscal year, it seemed like the bleeding had stopped. But here's the reality. Cuts, while sometimes necessary, rarely solve the underlying problem. In fact, in many cases, they create new ones. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about cutting wasteful or unnecessary spending. We should always remain vigilant and ensure that we are fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. Sometimes that means making cuts in staffing or programs that are not providing enough of a public benefit. But cutting critical services can demoralize your staff. It can slow down your permitting processes, frustrate your residents, and choke off the very programs that bring value to the community. It can spark a cycle of deferred maintenance, deferred investment, and deferred vision. So what's the alternative? When I arrived in the first city I served as city manager, the organization was facing a significant structural deficit. In fact, the problem was so large that when I was hired, I was told by a member of the city council that I would probably have the job for about 3 years and then need to find a new one, because at that point the city would likely run out of money and have to disincorporate. Each year, the city was digging into its dwindling reserves, and there just wasn't much left. Staffing levels were already incredibly lean, and salaries were already well below average. There was no way to make cuts to staffing or programming without eliminating critical public services. So instead of reaching for the scissors, we asked a more important question. How can we generate new revenue? Sustainable revenue, revenue derived largely from new programs that enhance service levels to the community. One of the key initiatives we implemented was an EMS subscription program, giving residents affordable access to emergency medical services while generating new revenue for the city. We launched a residential rental registration and inspection program, not just to raise money, but to improve health and safety standards in the city's rental stock. We renegotiated our solid waste hauling agreement, which hadn't been updated in years, increasing the franchise fee revenue without being a big burden to ratepayers. And then we took a very bold step. We created our own fire department. The city transitioned from a county fire service contract to a locally controlled department. That move alone created big savings while improving service levels and response times. It wasn't without challenges, and it was not universally popular, at least not at first. But it was the kind of structural solution that cities need to consider if they're serious about long-term sustainability. Now, here's something that might surprise you. This city didn't have much commercial land. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for traditional economic development. So what did we do? We leaned into enterprise activity. We purchased commercial real estate not to compete with the private sector, but to generate rental income and build value for the public. I know some people bristle at that. Government shouldn't be in the business of competing with the private sector. And I get it. But let's ask a better question. If a city can generate non-tax revenue through sound investments, isn't that better than raising taxes or cutting services? There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Every community is different. But the point is this. If you're only looking at what you can cut, you're missing the full picture. Revenue isn't just about taxes. It's about unlocking the value of your assets, your partnerships, and your creativity. So here's a question for you. When was the last time your city had a serious conversation about the revenue that didn't start with, "We have no choice"? What if instead it started with, "What could we build if we had the courage to try something new?" Mistake number 2, overlooking cost recovery and structural fixes. In my mind, one of the big mistakes local governments sometimes make is failing to address the structural imbalances that often drive deficits in the first place. I can't tell you how many cities I've seen with user fee schedules that haven't been updated in 10, 15, even 20 years. It's like time stood still, and so did the revenue. Meanwhile, the costs of providing those services have gone up. Salaries, benefits, vehicles, materials, all more expensive than they were a decade ago. And yet, we're charging 2005 prices in a 2025 economy. In the first 2 cities I managed, one of the key things we did was commission a user fee study. We looked at our entire service catalog, planning, engineering, recreation, facilities, and asked, what does it actually cost to provide these services? And what are we recovering? In the second city I managed, community services was a big operation. The city had over a dozen parks, a community center, a senior center, a community swimming pool, a skate park, baseball fields, football and soccer fields, basketball, tennis, and pickleball courts, and even a state-of-the-art performing arts center. The city put on numerous festivals and special events throughout the year, including concerts, 4th of July fireworks, and even a rodeo at its equestrian center. In total, the city spent about $8 million per year on community services. When I arrived, the cost recovery rate was just 35%. That meant that for every dollar we spent on classes, camps, facility rentals, etc., we were only bringing in 35 cents. Well, that's not sustainable. So we redesigned the model with a focus on cost recovery. Now, not every single service and every program is going to fully cost recover. We understand that we are providing services to the community, and some of those services simply cost more than we could ever recover in fees. But there are many areas where cost recovery is viable. We spent less on big-name bands and featured more local talent. We took over the sale of alcohol and spaces for vendor booths at festivals and concerts. We charged for parking and for VIP experiences at city events like the 4th of July fireworks. And while some in the community pushed back on these changes, we explained that it was either this or not being able to provide these services at all. And guess what? Participation didn't plummet. People understood because we took the time to explain the rationale, and we did it with empathy. In under 2 years, we increased cost recovery for community services from 35% to 75%. Out of an $8 million budget, our net cost of all community services programming was brought down to $2 million. So let me ask you something. Are you unintentionally subsidizing programs with your general fund that benefit only a small slice of the population? Are your planners and inspectors operating at a deficit because your development fees haven't kept up? These aren't just line item problems. They're systemic inefficiencies. While it can be politically uncomfortable to adjust fees for service upwards, the longer you wait to fix them, the deeper your deficit becomes. Fixing cost recovery isn't glamorous. It doesn't win elections, but it builds the foundation for everything else. So again, I'll ask, what assumptions are you making about your fees, your services, and your contracts? And how long has it been since you tested those assumptions against reality? Mistake number 3, failing to communicate honestly with the public. This third mistake is maybe the most important, failing to communicate transparently with your residents. Look, I get it. Nobody wants to be the one to break bad news. As city leaders, we feel a strong pressure to reassure, to stay positive, to make it seem like everything is under control. But if we're not careful, that instinct can turn into avoidance. And that's when the trouble really starts. When I came into my last city management position, the city had just gone through a period of significant investment. New parks, new public buildings, a performing arts center. But those projects, while valuable, had depleted reserves, and revenue growth had not kept pace with the new demands. The truth was easy to miss because the budget looked better on paper than it actually was. That's because millions of dollars in one-time COVID relief funds were temporarily boosting our bottom line. On top of that, the city was showing as revenue on the balance sheet loans due to the general fund from various development impact fee, or DIF, funds. But in reality, the DIF funds were millions of dollars short of being able to actually repay those loans. So we were faced with 2 choices. Quietly make deep cuts to critical services such as police and fire and hope no one noticed, or tell the truth and invite the public into the conversation. We chose the latter. We produced a video titled Community at a Crossroads. We laid out the facts. We didn't sugarcoat. We said, here's where we are, here's how we got here, and here's what the future looks like if we don't take action. Then we asked the community, what kind of city do you want to live in? We launched a financial fixer tool, a web-based platform where residents could test different budget scenarios. Cut fire, close the pool, raise taxes, you choose. And then we held a 4-hour town hall style community meeting. 4 hours. Not a rubber stamp hearing, a real, honest, line-by-line discussion. And what happened? Residents responded, not with anger, but with appreciation. They felt informed, respected, included. When we put Measure S, a 1% sales tax, on the ballot, it passed in a politically conservative city with over 60% of the vote. Not because we scared people, but because we trusted them to make the right decision when presented with the facts. Here's a big takeaway. If your community only knows what you've told them in press releases or budget summaries, do they really understand the stakes? And if they don't, how can you expect them to support a solution? The reality is, most residents don't read city budgets. They don't attend council meetings, and they're not combing through ACFRs or fiscal forecasts. So if we're serious about engaging our communities in meaningful conversation about fiscal health, we have to meet them where they are and speak in a language they understand. That means going beyond the numbers and telling a story. It means explaining what a $7 million deficit actually means, that it could result in closing a fire station, reducing police patrols, eliminating youth programs, or leaving potholes unfilled for months. It means using infographics and visual tools to break down complex financial realities in a simple, relatable way. Tools like interactive budget simulators, where residents can explore trade-offs themselves, just like with our financial fixer tool. It means recording videos that speak directly to residents, not just polished press statements, but honest, eye-level conversations that explain how we got here, what the options are, and what's at stake. It means hosting public workshops, community meetings, and town halls that are less about presenting to the public and more about inviting them in, providing space for real dialogue, making time to listen before asking for support. And it means being consistent. Transparency isn't a one-time event. It's a culture. It's built through steady communication, follow-up, and accountability. The goal isn't just to secure support for a tax measure or a budget decision. The goal is to build trust, because once your community believes you're telling them the whole story, they're much more likely to stand with you when the hard choices come. So again, I'll ask, are your residents being given just enough information to criticize or enough context to actually care? Because how we communicate during a crisis doesn't just shape public opinion. It shapes public trust for years to come. Honest communication isn't just ethical, it's strategic. It's how you build the buy-in you need to lead effectively. For more on effective communication in today's social media-driven world, check out episode number 3 of Gov360, titled Winning at Social Media in Local Government, with social media guru Sam Tolles. Now, let's shift to the big picture. Structural deficits are daunting. They stretch you. They expose what's outdated or inefficient. They force difficult choices. But they also offer an opportunity to redefine what good government looks like in your city. They invite us to ask better questions. What services do we really need to provide? How should we fund them? Who are we trying to serve, and how are we including them in the conversation? In particular, we need to talk honestly about the provision and the funding of public safety. Now, I'm a firm believer in the importance of police and fire services. Public safety is and should remain local government's number one priority. It's foundational. People expect their city to keep them safe, to show up when they call 911, to be there in their worst moments. But here's the hard truth. The cost of delivering those services is growing faster than most cities' ability to pay for them. Personnel costs driven by salary increases, overtime, and pension obligations continue to rise year after year. Equipment, vehicles, training, and compliance costs are also escalating. And in many cities, especially those that contract for services, the annual cost escalators are outpacing revenue growth altogether. Public safety often accounts for 50%, 60%, even 70% of a city's general fund. And when it grows unchecked, it begins to crowd out everything else. Parks, libraries, roads, economic development, and community services, these are all things residents care deeply about too, even if they don't carry the same urgency as a 911 call. So we have to ask the question, are our current funding models sustainable? Can we keep layering new cost onto the general fund and expect to maintain balanced budgets without sacrificing other essential services? At some point, something has to give. Maybe it's time to consider dedicated revenue streams for public safety. Some cities have passed special public safety sales taxes, utility taxes, or parcel taxes that carve out funding for police and fire services. Some have created public safety or fire protection districts with dedicated revenue streams from a parcel tax. These measures, when designed with transparency and oversight, can provide stability without compromising the rest of the budget. Maybe it's time to evaluate new models entirely, like regional partnerships, tiered response systems, preventative investments. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. Every city is different. Political will, community expectations, existing contracts, all of it factors in. But doing nothing is no longer an option. Kicking the can down the road won't make these costs go away. In fact, it only guarantees that harder decisions will fall to someone else later, and likely with fewer options left on the table. So let's have the conversation now. Let's challenge our assumptions. Let's be bold enough to ask not just how much we're spending on public safety, but whether we're spending it the right way. We won't solve these challenges overnight, but what we can do is start leading with greater clarity, courage, and honesty, especially when it comes to the conversations we've been avoiding for too long. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about finance, it's about leadership. I'll leave you with this. Budget deficits are not just financial events. They are moments of truth. They show us who we are as leaders. They force us to choose between short-term comfort and long-term health. And they ask us to lead not from fear, but from vision. To every local government leader out there navigating this storm, you are not alone. The work you do matters, and you have more tools and more allies than you think. Now, I am by no means a leading expert in municipal finance, but I know that many of you are struggling with budget challenges in your organizations, and I just wanted to share some of my experiences and observations from 25 years in and around local government. Many in the field are much more knowledgeable than I am on this topic, which is why I very much hope you'll tune in to upcoming episodes where we'll be joined by some of those experts. Thank you for watching and listening. If you found value in today's episode, consider sharing it with a colleague or leaving a review. It helps us grow the Gov360 community. Look for the next episode of Gov360 to drop in 2 weeks, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We're on all the major podcast platforms. Subscribe on YouTube for video of each episode and for show clips, and subscribe to the Gov360 newsletter on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where we can all connect and continue the conversation. Thank you for joining us on Gov360. Until next time, govern boldly, my friends.